on television in Canada, and I get to go in and really try different wild and different and interesting things with Bellator. And the more I've got to know the Bellator fighters and the Bellator fights, the more I love them.
Yeah, so that leads to my first question. When you brought up Ferguson and that fight on Saturday, are you concerned that they're still rolling with this, even with the pandemic stuff going on? And it's a contact sport, and obviously there's not going to be any fans. But are you concerned that they're still going with this fight? Dana White is still going with this?
I don't know that I've even formed an opinion on that. My take. When they were talking about doing it in April, I was like, this is not good. Like, that was my reaction at the time. I was like, this isn't good. Like, this. Whereas now it feels a little more like there's been time to try to figure out how to do this. Yet at the same time, you hear endocrinologists and experts like, I don't have expertise in that. Yeah. I study, human physiology, and I study kinesiology and these things, but I don't study viral, the spread of infectious diseases, and I don't know much about government. Those aren't my areas of expertise, so I haven't really formed an opinion on that as to what I think about it. Am I worried that, we're going to have some bad shit happen? Yeah, kind of I hope it does. That there's not, all of a sudden, 7 UFC fighters are infected, then somebody, all that kind of shit. I hope that all doesn't happen. Yeah. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to try. I've heard about a lot of the things that are public, and even some stuff because I have friends that are managers and coaches, and I'm hearing about, and they're working hard to try to keep everybody safe, and that's good to see. But my expertise is the fights themselves. So once it was on, even in April, to be totally frank, when it was being talked about, my bosses here, where we're a broadcast partner, were like, well, it looks like UFC will be back. And I literally had to think to myself, even though this is what I love and this is what I've dedicated my life to, I was like, should I be covering this if it's happening on tribal land in mid-April against government? Should I even be working on this? Fortunately, they shut that down, and now it's a month later, and I feel much more comfortable with it from my own personal, we're all just people working. The fighters are just men and women showing up to work. And I'm up here in Canada, sitting in my house, talking about them fighting. We all are just people doing the things we do. So you got to feel good about what you're doing, and I do now. I'm not worried about it. I'm not stressed. I'm not hoping nobody finds out that I'm working on this thing. It feels more like I think we're all kind of. It seems a bit more up and up now, and again, there's definitely a lot of science that's saying you shouldn't be doing this, and I don't think they're pretending that doesn't exist. They're just, if you know Dana, I know him a little bit personally, but I also know him from studying him. This dude will make shit happen no matter what it takes. That's the root of who he is. So when he looks at it, he's like, I don't care what scientists say. I think we can find the way. He's a problem solver. And so it's the problem is there's a scary infectious disease. Let's fucking solve it. That's who he is. So I respect that. And, but yeah, I hope nothing bad happens. I hope nobody gets sick. And I hope it's not a whole bunch of bad news everybody's talking about, after the fact. I hope it all goes nice and smooth. You get a bunch of killer fights, and then, we move on.
So, will they, obviously these two fighters, especially for Saturday's fight, do you think they got tested already, obviously, but do you think do you think they will make them get tested another day before the fight?
Yes, I believe so. I believe that there's a number of tests that happen, as well as it's not just, do you have it? It's okay, you do not have it. So we test you, and if we can be sure, and there's, of course, that's flexible. There's false positives and false negatives, but let's say, okay, you don't have it. Now we got to make it a scenario where you do everything you got to do all week while be around as few humans as possible. That's the biggest part, is how do we take people who are used to training with whole groups of teams and having managers and agents and giant dinners after the weigh-ins that most teams have and all these things, and instead be like, okay, we need you safe and healthy. You're here, it's Wednesday, and you seem healthy, and it seems like you don't have any virus. Great. We need you in a cage at midnight on Saturday like that too. What we do in these next few days is the challenge. But again, I don't have a bias. There are Although I am employed by a broadcast partner, I don't work for the UFC. They aren't, I don't have a negative bias or a positive bias. I try to look at it like just honestly, without, sometimes we say we don't have a bias, but sometimes we like to just gotcha. I'm not like that. I like Dana in particular. I like him. He's been very nice and good to me. He brought me in to do a couple of things, and he likes my work. And, so I have a little bias I'm just identifying my own bias before I think about what I'm going to say. So I have a little bias there because I kind of really like the guy. But then there's other people who work in that company I think are assholes. So I think that maybe that balances out, right? My overall feeling from knowing that is that this guy, Dana White in particular, solves problems. Now, this is a very challenging, weird problem that he doesn't have expertise in. However, part of being a good problem solver is figuring out who to bring in to fix certain stuff. So they've brought in some of the best doctors that have worked in this area. You even talked to John McCarthy, who I work with over at Bellator. I don't know if he has a bias, a negative or positive, but my feeling is maybe the UFC isn't his favorite thing in the world, although he's worked in there. But that's, again, just my feeling. Even John was like, hey, as Big John McCarthy, he's like, as a somebody who legislator and a teacher of judges and referees, I'm telling people this is legit. This is a real commission being done properly. So yes, by all means, if you're going to ref it, go ref it. If you're going to judge it, go judge it. And again, John, much like myself, in April, he was saying to guys, you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be reffing these shows. And he is saying this one, you should. This is legit. They're doing the right things. They're doing it by the books. They're doing it according to legislation and commissions and all the things you got to do to put on a legit show. So even Big John McCarthy is telling the refs, yeah, it's legit. Go do it. So, and even friends of mine, again, who are agents and coaches and stuff, they were hesitant. But some of them, Tony's agent team is all there. They got on a plane. They went to Florida. They know the risks. They don't have to be there. Now, when I say that, they don't have to be there they don't have a specific role that's being done. But as you've got a guy in Tony Ferguson who's fighting for a world title, it's the biggest fight. There's always the biggest fight, but the next one is really important. His whole future, maybe fighting Khabib or Conor or any of these things, all gets affected by this. Money, all of those things. He needs you. He needs you. Like Tony needs his people and Gaethje needs his people. So they're all going, and so now and there's a hotel that has been quarantined just for the fighters. And I think also, AEW, what's it stand? Something Extreme Wrestling. They just AEW staff and wrestlers and UFC staff and fighters are in this hotel. So it's probably a fascinating place to be, although they're all standing 6 feet away from each other.
Yeah, that's crazy. So before I get to the Bellator side of your career, I just want to bring up. So what do you think of? Obviously, what was your reaction when Cyborg left UFC to come to Bellator? What was your reaction when that happened?
That's a really good question because she just seemed to have a lot of conflict with Dana. There's a particular kind of fighter who sees their career a particular way that seems to fit very, very well with Bellator, and maybe has some challenges with the UFC. Dana aside, Joe Rogan aside, John Anik, some of the stuff that works there, some of that company I've had conflict with in different ways, some personal and some about content and stuff. Conflict is a part of their evolution of how their company came to be. Companies take on identities. If we talk about a business, it's an organization. The word organization means we have organized a bunch of people in a way that we can try to do something. Within some strong, kind of confident, masculine organizations, there is conflict on the inside. And this is one, and it's not rare. That's not rare. That's a very normal part of corporate America. So something, particularly fighters who kind of start to develop their own brand, their own identity, their own audience that isn't just the audience of the promoters. Sometimes they tend to seem to have conflict over there, whereas Bellator is much more like, hey, let's make it about the fighter. And this isn't a judgment. This, again, is not a judgment or a bias. It's just my agnostic analysis. Is the UFC, and I don't think I'm breaking any, I'm coming up with any giant concepts here. I think this is pretty well known and regularly discussed. The UFC does their business model as a brand first. So they push the brand. Mm-hmm. So they make UFC fans, not Cyborg fans, or not, Mike Perry fans, or, they create, part of the way that they promote their product is to create, is called brand forward. That's the marketing philosophy. So it's you become a UFC fan. Cyborg has Cyborg fans sometimes, and so and Conor McGregor has Conor McGregor fans. Now Conor McGregor has so much leverage, and seems to be a smart negotiator in how he puts things together. He can sit down, call Dana or any of the other key ingredients and say, hey, this is what I want to do. Let's do it. And they'll look and go, hey, Conor wants X percent, but he brings in X percent. He's going to get rich. We're going to get rich. Let's do that. Fighters who are not quite Conor McGregor but have similar philosophies, Cyborg's fits into that category. If you're an individual, if you are, sometimes you don't quite fit in over there. And over at Bellator, they're like, yeah, great. Let's bring your audience. Let's make it about you. Bellator's a little more fighter forward, a little more individual. They promote the individual in a different way. And that's it's not meant to be good or bad or positive or negative. The UFC is a fucking massively successful company. So to the people who are working in it, what they're doing is right. If their job is to be successful, to sell, to become bigger and to become more influential, and then they're being successful. They're doing it. It's an interesting one, being a step out from the UFC by covering it as a broadcast partner, but like deeper into Bellator. Chael is the same. Chael Sonnen is the same. He works for ESPN, but he also works directly for Bellator. You get to see a little bit of it, and you see how massively different these companies really are, dramatically different. They really are. Working for them is, being a fighter for them is, it's very different, very, very different. Pluses and minuses all around, If you're Conor McGregor, the UFC is where you should be. Like, they have the biggest reach. If you're Cyborg, Bellator is where you should be. It's probably they're going to be more of a business partner and less of a boss. And I think that's where I was meandering to get to. I think that point right there is and it's been the same for me since I've started working at Bellator. Their reputation is that they're like a family, and they're open to things, and they're really they aren't trying to like squeeze every dollar. They're trying to but if they make you successful, they make them. That's their reputation. And then you get in there, and it's true. It's true. It's a really nice environment to work in. You're around like some pretty great people that, like, I'm doing some really neat new stuff. Just even next week, we're starting out with a group of different kinds of content related to analysis and things I've done a little bit of, but we're taking it much deeper and fuller with a collection of work that we're going to do over the next few weeks. And there's not a lot of places in the world you could innovate some of the ideas that we're doing, and you'd have, people really open to it. The bigger the company, and this isn't boxing MMA related. I think this is a good generalization. The bigger the company, the less flexible they will be. The metaphor people often use is it's much harder, takes a lot longer to turn around a big boat than a canoe, right? It's harder to try new things and to create change in the bigger the company. If you're in Coca-Cola, or you're in Budweiser, or you're in McDonald's, or you're in the NFL, or, if the bigger the company you're in, the harder it is to be an individual and to be different. And so, but it took me personally a long time to learn that and to understand that and to recognize that. And now I have started to, and it's the balance of things I'm doing right now is the perfect fit for me. I get to cover the big machine for my country. And and which is I'm proud to work for the biggest sports channel in Canada. But then I also get to go into the other one and be a little deeper into it, and so it's neat. It's really I'm lucky. I'm super. Lucky. I'm really grateful.
That's awesome. And before we get to this Bellator, I just want to talk about. I obviously next Wednesday I'm having Frankie Edgar on
Killer.
at 12:30. Yeah, 12:30 p.m. on next Wednesday. So I just want to get your take on him. How many fights do you see him? How many more fights do you see him potentially scheduling or having before he officially retires?
And that's a really tough question, and it's a question if you ask him, and I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
The answer he gives you. When is this Monday? What day next week?
Next Wednesday, 12:30 p.m.
Wednesday, 12:30
Yeah.
p.m. Eastern time for you and Frankie Edgar. Well, when you ask Frankie, the answer he gives you on Wednesday at 12:45 p.m. or whenever you get to that question will not be necessarily the same answer he will give you 1 year from now. Because he is in the true veteran stage of his career. He could have 10 more fights. He's smart. He's learning. My big question, I know Frankie a little bit. I've spent a little time with him. He had me out to his gym in what's that little town? It's such a great...
Is in Hoboken.
Yeah, no, even
right?
smaller, right off the edge of that in New Jersey. Something River. But yeah, great little towny, a little gym. The front door was wide open. Nobody was in it. Like, but then again, in his small town, somebody got to fuck with Frankie Edgar. You know what I mean? And he had me over there, and I really like Frankie Edgar. He's a wonderful martial artist. He's exactly what Tom's River. Thank you. Mystic Black MMA. Hey, who's Mystic Black MMA? I love it. You're getting a follow. Tom's River. That's right. Tom's River. Mystic Black MMA is getting a follow after this. So Tom's River, New Jersey. Yeah. But Frankie is really everything you would want to see for a second there, but I think we're still there. Wrestling is very much a martial art. Wrestling is very much a martial art, but it's got its own unique identity, and it's very, especially Midwestern and American wrestling. And he is, to me, the pinnacle, the great, what a martial arts wrestler can become, I think, and a champion and a dad and a gentleman. Frankie's a good dude. If he's continuing to evolve, and I know he always does, he could have 10 fights, right? The big challenge becomes now, there'll be no doubt whether he identifies this, I'm sure he does, or not. It doesn't feel the same for that guy to get punched in the head as it did 7 years ago. Doesn't mean that he has taken too much damage. That's not... there's no science to say that. Although we all feel it. It hurts more for his body to get kicked in the leg than it once did. But other things are easier. Other things are a little less stressful. But what has to happen for these guys in this stage is this shit starts winning fights, right? And Frankie's always been smart, but you just start outsmarting these people. You start little brothering them, and you start beating with these grimy veteran tricks and stuff, and you get hit less. You get your body backed up less. If that's the next stage for him, he can fight 5, 7, 8, 9 times, 10 times. He could, and I hope so, because he loves it and he's good at it. Right? It's a champion. Wow. The guy was a world champion, dominant world champion at lightweight. He's smaller than me. I was a bantamweight. I was 130. I fought at 135 pounds. He's smaller than I am. And he was the lightweight champion of the world and dominant and beaten monsters. Gray Maynard probably weighed 180 pounds by fight time
Yeah.
He fought him for nine rounds or whatever he fought him for, all told. And Frankie probably weighed 150 by the time the fight was over, and he was sweating. You know, like that's he's amazing. Please tell Frankie that I said hello, and he knows.
I will.
Tell him how much I love and respect him.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to it because I'm from Jersey too. I live in New Jersey too, and he's a Jersey kid guy also. So yeah. I'm really looking forward to this interview. Yeah. So, but now looking to Bellator real quick. I want to get to a couple people here. Actually, my neighbors and I, we know a fighter named Ricky Bandejas from Brick, New Jersey. Yeah. So, and then I've seen you break down tape of him. So I want to get your take on him as a fighter and how he has evolved over the years. And do you think he's targeting a bigger fight now in his career? Yeah. So he got choked out by a really killer up and comer, Patrick Mix, and Patrick Mix is a badass. So other than that hiccup, he has beaten everybody that he's faced, and he has fought better, with the exception also he lost to Juan Archuleta, but many people actually thought he won that fight. So he's sitting right at the top where he can and should be fighting for a title, although Patrick Mix defeated him soundly quickly. That's just what it is. But one thing, I love Ricky's skills. I love watching him fight. But one thing I really like about Ricky is he's ruthlessly honest, and those guys get better constantly. He's ruthlessly honest about how he thinks, how he feels, how he trains, his shortcomings, and he still wins even when he's got challenges, like a fight in England or Dublin. He was all physically messed up, and he still found a way to win. I really, really like Ricky. He's championship material for sure. And then another fighter in the I'm not sure, Kevin Lee, right? South Lee MMA. I think his Instagram handle is South Lee, I think. But what do you think of him as like a fighter? Keith Lee, Kevin's brother. Yeah, Keith Lee. Yeah. Sorry, Keith's killer too. Yeah, man. There's a lot of good young fighters. Like, it's a tricky thing when. Because of how we were talking about biases early, frequency bias, recency bias, how we get biased by how we receive our information. You and I can say, hey, some of these guys, Ricky Bandejas, Patrick Mix, Keith Lee, these are like top 10 and future champions who could beat anybody in the world. They are some of the very, very best fighters in the world. You and I can say that, and you and I know that's true. And if we talk to, Matt Serra or Joe Rogan or like somebody who's educated, they know that's true. But you talk to an average person, some of them don't understand that Bellator is just a separate brand. They think maybe somehow Keith Lee should be fighting in the UFC. And if he did, then they would believe that he was one of the best. But these are fighters. This isn't about a brand. It's not about a logo. It's about the individuals and their skills. And these are some of the best fighters in the world. Keith Lee, I commentated his first fight, and I broke down his last fight. And I'm a big fan. I really like him. And Kevin, his brother Kevin Lee, who fights in the UFC, is a wonderful dude. I had the pleasure to introduce him to George St. Pierre, and now they're good friends. And Kevin trains at TriStar there, and I'm very proud I got to introduce those two. Very pleased. Keith's awesome. There's so many good young guys. It's so tricky. Like, before, you could say, oh yeah, man, this kid's going to be a world champion, and he very well can. But the tricky, crazy shit is that guy's also really fucking good. That guy's really good. There's a guy that's that good in Brazil, and there's two guys that good in Japan, and it's really wild. The next generation is crazy. But Keith he's still so young, and he's so good. I just did another little breakdown on him. I got a breakdown on him and a breakdown on Ricky Bandejas in The Dose, which is the show I do with Jay Glazer. You know Jay Glazer from NFL on Fox. Yep. Jay Glazer. Yeah, I'm trying to get him on the show too. So well, just send me a little blurb or whatever in my DM, and I'll pass it on to him. No promises. Like he may not see it. But I'll try to help. Jay's awesome. Jay's really awesome.
But Jay and I do a breakdown show for Bellator. It's called The Dose. The link is in my bio if anyone wants to see it. And it's a 20, 30 minute. But we got analysis of Bandejas and Keith Lee in that one.
So before I let you go, I know you have to hop off soon, but I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you.
Sure.
Who's the funniest person on the Bellator cast?
Chael Sonnen is a genius. Chael Sonnen is an absolute genius. He's brilliant. Like, he is so brilliant. So yes, I don't even know who's number two, but whoever's number two is a long distant number two. Chael is a genius. There's only one Chael Sonnen.
Favorite food?
Favorite food? Wow. I love tacos. I don't know why. There's something about, like, just put together fresh, and I really love tacos. I fucking love chicken wings. I like chicken wings. But a really, 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 really high-end, nice steak. There's nothing probably I prefer. And Chael's a big steak guy too, actually. But a really nice steak. That's one of the great pleasures in life.
Favorite thing to do outside of your work?
That shouldn't be such a hard question to answer. But because I do love my work so much, I train. My hobbies are training martial arts, and God, there should be one. I like listening to old classic music. Sitting outside. I like sitting at a cottage. Like, I like to go, do lots and lots of level up in my understanding of my job and progress, constantly be getting better. Like, that is sort of my root purpose. And so I'm learning and studying different things all the time, trying to go further. So you start to get a touch burnt out. And when you do, I like to go to a cottage and just sit and watch water. I like to watch water. I like to go to Mexico and eat tacos and sit and watch water. So I think looking at water.
Best all around fighter in Bellator right now.
Oh. I mean, that's so hard because best is so tricky. On his best day, I gotta say Douglas Lima. I gotta just say Douglas Lima. He's really people think of the fact that he can leg kick people to death, but he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He doesn't ever go to the ground unless he wants to. Like, he's such a great fighter. But on his best day, at his best, Gegard Mousasi maybe is the best too. Those guys are going to fight. It's crazy. Hopefully they're going to, we get back to it soon. Ryan Bader's pretty special. He's turned into something. He'd beat John Jones right now. I really do believe he would. Jones, and I don't say that trying to create debate or argument or anything. And I also say that knowing that on any given night there's 1,000 variables that all change, and that may not be so. Mm-hmm. But people have started. Jones is brilliant. He's brilliant, but he hasn't progressed that much. At least not on any surface way. There's subtleties that he's, and comfort, but you don't have to go look too far to find out that he doesn't work very hard. And that's part of a reputation, but I get it from other people, from people even around him. Like, he just doesn't. And Ryan Bader has. And there's, there are, I hate talking negative, actually. It just feels wrong to me to talk about a brilliant artist negatively. So, it's just not, it feels weird. It feels weird for me to do that. But who else? Patricio Pitbull. I didn't understand. I had a preconceived idea of what I thought he was until I was at Bellator shows, sitting, 10 feet from the cage, seeing it in real time. When he fought Juan Archuleta. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think I'm back.
Yeah.
They said I was paused, but when I saw level, like, so, yeah, the gratefulness you feel automatically, like for your own good fortune, and then for people like that, like the difference is massive. So it's pretty special. It's pretty special to see, and it's one of those things. Sometimes we get too used to something, like we say it too automatic.
Some great stuff. So follow him on Twitter, Instagram. So I just want to say thank you for coming on. This was awesome. And you and your family stay safe. And I'll be posting this interview on all social media formats.
Wicked, man. Well, you too. Like I said, I love your hustle. And if you work this hard, like always, even when it gets tough or scary or you don't see a reward, and you just work this hard, you'll be a genius, sooner than later, and it'll be big. This is just how life works. People can watch that.
Yeah.
People can watch you do that. As long as you don't get discouraged or quit, it'll go to huge things, and people can remember this conversation where I said that. That's an inevitability because all you're doing is, through repetition, getting better and better every day. You're getting better at talking, better at posting, better at understanding stuff, better at finding people, better. And all of a sudden, you're